Welcome to today's episode, brought to you by the Women in Medicine Summit, a transformational CME conference happening September 13th to 14th at the Drake Hotel in Chicago. Engage in leadership programming, learn negotiation skills, receive on-site coaching and mentoring, and see who will win this year's I Stand With Her awards. This year, we're excited to offer unique programming that includes a special session on how using improv comedy can bring fun back into medicine. We also have financial sessions tailored to help you navigate the complexities of personal and professional finances. Discover ways to advance into leadership roles, combat burnout, and either reignite your love for your current role or find joy in a new career path. Don't forget our Friday evening gala, a highlight this year you definitely won't want to miss. Register now at womeninmedicinesummit.org and be part of the movement that is shaping the future of healthcare. Join us to network, learn, and celebrate the power of women in medicine.
Welcome to the Revitalizing Doctor podcast. We interview trailblazers in medicine that embody the Revitalize Women vision to empower women to innovate and influence medicine, to value authenticity, respect, and work-life harmony. We recognize the challenges in medicine, and we're committed to providing coaching-informed strategies to help you go from surviving to thriving. I am so excited today to have Sheri Dewan. She is a full-time board-certified neurosurgeon practicing in the Metro Chicago area, affiliated with Northwestern Medicine. She is one of roughly 200 board-certified women neurosurgeons in the United States. She completed her neurosurgery residency at Brown University and graduate degree at Northwestern University. She is a proud member of the Women in Neurosurgery WINS Congress of Neurological Surgeons and American Association of Neurological Surgeons. Dr. Dewan donates her time performing charity surgery in southern India and sits on multiple charity foundation boards. She is also currently studying business and finance at the University of Oxford Executive Education Program in London, England. Dr. Dewan is trilingual and has lived in 5 countries. In her spare time, which I'm very curious to hear when that is, she enjoys traveling, yoga, and spending time with her husband and 3 children. She is also author of the book, Cutting a Path. So I love every guest we've had on this podcast, but I am very excited to have Sheri. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here and chatting with you and sharing more about my life and my work in the book.
So I want to start off with the question we ask almost every guest. Why did you become a doctor?
That's a really, I think, a powerful and very important question for many people. And I think a different answer for many people too. For me, it was always a calling. It was really a desire to really help people. I know that sounds trite, but the truth is that even from a young age, I wanted to help people. I would see people in pain. I would see people with a medical problem. I was always curious about, what was going on with them. Is there something that I could do? So that empathy, I think I had as a child. And, I kind of carried that through when I got to my, teenage years. I would spend a lot of time at the library learning about science and biology, and I would check out books on the brain. And I was just really fascinated by this mysterious organ and, that holds all of our thoughts and hopes and dreams, and then as time went on, this desire to become a doctor. I didn't have any doctors in my family, so I come from a very long line of academicians, PhDs, mathematicians, but we had no MDs. So it was a little unusual for me to have the desire. But then really, I think the moment for me, especially with neurosurgery, came when my own mother suffered a life-threatening brain aneurysm when I was in my 20s and almost died. And she had an anterior communicating artery aneurysm, for those who are listening who know anything about the brain, which ruptured on, a very beautiful, normal day where she had just gone out with a friend for coffee. And that, I think, was a very pivotal moment for me because that's actually when I met a neurosurgeon for the first time. And he took her to surgery in the next few days and saved her life. So that moment for me really became pivotal to my calling and the reasons that, I wanted to go into the field. And it was really about wanting to save other people's mothers and other people's family members. And I think it's important, in this day and age to have the reasons that we've wanted to do it stay with us kind of throughout, because, as I'm sure we'll discuss, healthcare is changing. It has changed so much, especially since the times of COVID.
Yeah, you articulated exactly why we asked that question, because burnout is really, really high in medicine. I'm an emergency physician, and unfortunately, we lead all the specialties with 65% of us feeling burned out right now. So we start with that question because what we found over time is a lot of our guests, what got them into medicine isn't always what's keeping them in medicine. But how do you feel about that? I mean, you have this very powerful story, and that's how you open the beginning of your book, is what happened to your mom and how that really has provided this force throughout your career. Is there anything else that is keeping you being a neurosurgeon right now, which I think everyone listening to our podcast has a sense that neurosurgery is one of the hardest specialties, certainly the longest training and the intensity that's required to be able to do these long surgeries. I mean, I'm in awe of a lot of my colleagues, a lot of my surgical colleagues, but I think neurosurgeons in particular, I hold almost a reverence for, because I'm not going to call you a superhero because that's not good. You're very much a human. But how have you stayed in such a challenging profession?
Part of my desire to write the book was to show people that, it's not easy. And you may have this burning desire to become a neurosurgeon and all the purpose in the world, but, you're going to encounter these obstacles that are going to come at you. And you're going to have to find a way to work through that and really identify, what is your purpose and what is your path? And, there's a scene in the book where, I'm a medical student and I'm applying for neurosurgery, and I'm at an interview at a really high-powered university. And, I'm told by the senior neurosurgeon, that neurosurgery is only for white males. And, what do you do with that information? I'm in my 20s. I've devoted, so much of my time, energy on this path. Here I am at the moment where I'm applying for residency and I'm essentially disqualified because I'm a woman and because I'm an Indian and because, all of these other things. And so, at the end of the day, the way I chose to deal with it was to kind of brush it off and keep going. And I think there are barriers. There is racism. There is discrimination. There are all of these things that we talk about, but how you choose to handle them and how you choose to internalize them or externalize them, I think, is an individual choice. And so I always had the purpose of what brought me to the field, but I also had people who would say, no, you're, the naysayers in the book too, who, would say things like, well, you're a woman, you can't do this job, or you want to be a mother, you can't do this job, or you want to be married, you can't do this job. And so staying grounded and having your core group of people who you can bounce things off of, and for me, that was my husband, that was my parents, that was my sister, those were my people. And if I was ever doubting myself or questioning, is this the right path, or did I do something that was not right, or should I do something else? I would turn to those people and they would guide me. And, those people don't necessarily need to be your family. They could be friends. They could be colleagues. They could be, a collective group. I think having those outside voices sometimes is so key, and the support network, I think, that we all need to really avoid the burnout that we're seeing in medicine and get back to the reasons why we did it in the first place, and keep the passion and keep the purpose. Because what we have is a really powerful gift. I mean, we can save people's lives. I mean, think about the enormity of that and the privilege of that, and then for us to be pushed out of the field because of somebody's opinion about your gender or your race or your ethnicity or your sexual orientation. I mean, if you think about how silly that is, it seems that the gifts that we have are meant to be shared. And I take that very seriously. I mean, I've done, a lot of charity work in India and for that very reason, because you have the skills, you have the gift, and it's meant to be shared.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Are you a physician mom with school-aged children feeling utterly exhausted? My friend Dr. Sheeta Shaffi invites you to take a little time this summer to join her in a small, intimate group for meaningful conversations. Dr. Shaffi is an emergency physician, coach, and mom to 8-year-old twins. She understands firsthand what you're going through. This isn't a pizza party or a yoga class. You'll meet for 2 one-hour sessions twice a month starting in July to help you move out of exhaustion, let go of mom guilt, and live a life you're not only proud of, but can truly enjoy. Connect with her on LinkedIn or Instagram at Sheeta Shaffi to learn more. Sheeta is spelled Shideh, and Shaffi is spelled Shafie. You can also check the show notes for a link so you can connect with her there as well. Gosh, I just want to play that, like pump it through the halls of the hospital. And it's so interesting that you're articulating many of the concepts that we've learned at Revitalize, that channeling your passion and your purpose, and we call it your board of directors, having those core group of people that you can go to because it is going to be tough. What we do is incredibly challenging. And on top of all the things that you've pointed out, medicine's hard inherently, even for cis white men. And then you add in all the things that we're talking about today. By chance, do you know Dr. Vinnie Aurora?
That name's very familiar to me, and I'm trying to put a face and a name together.
So Vinnie is dean over at University of Chicago Medical School, and I interviewed her on a different podcast that I used to co-host called The Emergency Mind. And I wanted to pick your brain on something that had come up during that podcast. So Vinnie is very innovative, and I think her handle on Twitter is Future Docs. So that really shows you that she's thinking on how can medicine change and transform. And we got talking. So she's actually an expert in, we jokingly say, lack of sleep among residents. And I think you know a thing or two about sleep deprivation as a neurosurgeon. What she said really blew my mind. And I'm wondering what your reaction is for neurosurgery. When I think back to my residency after talking with Vinnie, there's a lot of things that residents do that really isn't required by a resident. If you think about the amount of time we spend documenting and like dealing with an EMR that's pretty dysfunctional, a lot of places that we work. We actually have a term for it in medicine. We call it scut, that, the first couple of years of residency is often you're scutting. And so when we look at the length of training and the number of hours residents work, could you imagine that you could still produce a neurosurgeon that's able to do what they need to do, the amazing surgeries and everything else that you do, without the 30-hour calls?
Yeah, that's a tough question. Only because I think in some ways, a patient that you've operated on that then subsequently has a problem, and then you subsequently care for that issue, is kind of like a continuity of care situation. However, I also feel that not having sleep is very detrimental, not only to your own health, but also to the safety of a patient. Because I have definitely had times where I've operated, where I've been up for 36 hours and, my hands are shaking or tremoring and, I'm not thinking as clearly. And I really do feel like sleep is a basic human right. It really is. And, in neurosurgery, we're notorious for, not letting up. So, it was very typical to work a full day, take an overnight call, and then work the rest of the day, and I would go home at 5 p.m. And there's another story in the book I've written about being sick. I had like a fever basically, and it was, who's going to cover? So you just do it. You just go in and you gut it out. I think long term, that's really detrimental. We've had so many residents that got into car accidents. We had people, who, developed unhealthy relationships with their families because they're their children because they were absent, for long periods of time. So, I guess, I think we need to live in a civil and humane society. And I think, in medicine and neurosurgery, we need to really say, yes, we want to do these incredible things. And yes, we want to be brain surgeons. And yes, we want to take care of all these issues and medical problems. But on some level, we need to be good to ourselves too. And really staying up for 30 hours and trying to perform, we're not going to be at our best. It doesn't matter who you are. You're not going to be at your best. And I think you're not giving yourself enough and you're not giving your patient enough. So, I would argue for more humane work hours, or even a post-call day after it. And I think it has changed a little bit. Since I did my training where there really wasn't a post-call day, I think it has changed. I feel like the residents I see now look more well-rested. I don't know. Maybe they are getting a little bit more of a break. I do hear them having a little bit more quality of life. I hear them working out and going to Orange Theory and, doing these things that I found unfathomable in my residency. So I wonder if the pendulum is swinging, but I do think there is something to be said for sleep being a basic human right, because I really truly believe that it is.
I love that. I can't agree more. We actually know, I'm prior military. Sleep deprivation is a torture tactic. And then I also hear all the time like, oh, well, you just have to learn how to push through fatigue. What we actually know is sleep is one of these things you actually don't learn how to be sleep deprived. It's kind of a false thing. You know more about neuroscience than me, but people never learn how to be sleep deprived. Maybe they have a little insight that, yeah, I should be slower making this decision because I know I'm really tired and I know that's how I feel. But it's not like weightlifting where, you keep adding more weights and your muscles get stronger. That's just not what happens. So I hope that we see that change during the course of our careers. And I just wonder, one of the solutions I think is being more collaborative. When you work as a neurosurgeon, do you have other people on the team like nurse practitioners or PAs that are fielding some of the calls? So some of the calls that are appropriate for them to field before kind of funneling it up to your level and waking you up at 2 a.m.
For many years, we have asked for those types of extenders. And now it's just starting to kind of be more accepted. So, now we do have a team. Now, granted, that team doesn't always take night call. So the nights are still kind of up for grabs. And there are phone calls, that go on throughout the night. There's, it's midnight, then it's 1, then it's 2, then it's 3. And so by the time 6 a.m. rolls around, there's a significant amount of sleep deprivation. Although maybe you haven't had to go into the hospital to perform a surgery, still, it's broken sleep. And so that does wear on you over a period of time. Now, granted, I have, several people I work with. So it's not like you're taking call every night. The call is broken up. But, it is a challenge. And I think that's something that healthcare is really going to have to critically look at and address is how do we use physician extenders? How do we use advanced, practice providers to answer first call? And there are definitely practices across the country, colleagues I have that do have that model. They're only picking up the phone if they're going to surgery, and so I think that's going to become more accepted. And I think in many ways, we're going to have more nurses at the hospital than doctors at some point, because we're going to basically try to save the doctors for just the critical portion, of the case or the surgery. And we're going to have a lot of different layers in place. But I think the layers are more protective, for the doctor, because otherwise, if it's the same person picking up the phone every time, how are they functioning and how are they sleeping? And, the next day there's a clinic, the next day there's cases. So, how does that affect the next day also? So these are things that I think medicine's going to have to come to terms with. And in such a time where it's all about, productivity, and hospitals all have their bottom line, but how can we still be humane and civil in the way that we live and work so that we're giving our best to the patients, and we're not irritated, frustrated, tired, and all of these things. So, those are really, I think, key things that medicine's going to have to shift and really think about as we move forward.
And I think, part of the reason we founded Revitalize is we feel that having more women stay in medicine and become leaders, become chairs across the country. I think a lot of these patterns of, oh, well, we'll just keep working, we'll do these long calls, are rooted in patriarchy. I think a lot of the concepts that you're talking about is how do we make this humane and safe and work collaboratively in a team is more of a feminine way of leading.
I would agree. I think, the old ways of doing things, the 36-hour calls, it's antiquated in so many ways. And even culturally, I mean, if you look at other systems across internationally, they don't have the same type of situation in the United States in terms of healthcare and call and so forth that we do. So it's kind of eye-opening, I think, when you look outside the US too, to see how those systems work.
Let's pivot to that. So in your bio, it says trilingual and lived in 5 countries. And you're also in the Oxford Executive Education Program in London. So tell us a little bit about your international background and where you've lived and what those experiences have brought to your life here.
I was born in the US, but moved abroad when I was really young and lived in South Korea for several years in Seoul. Lived in Saudi Arabia in Dhahran. My father was in the oil business. He worked for Aramco, which is the oil company. So most of my upbringing was very global. I was exposed to a lot of different people from a lot of different backgrounds at American schools and embassy schools. And so I think, especially living in the Middle East, I saw a pretty big difference in terms of women and obviously the role that women had in society. One of my first memories about living in Saudi Arabia was we lived on a compound, the Aramco compound, which is the oil company. But when we left the compound, my mom, who was usually the driver, would switch with my dad. And she would wear, a very long dress and have these glasses on and put a scarf over her hair. And I was a child, and as was my sister, so we didn't have to change our clothing or anything like that. But that was one of my first memories of there being a difference between men and women, especially in, the Arab countries, and kind of carried over to the hospital system. And so when I was younger, I had really bad asthma. So I would go to the hospital, in Saudi, and there was really never any women docs, and so it was always, I remember one time asking, the doctor, the allergist, where are all the women doctors, And so I think those experiences really were interesting because then we moved back to the US and I saw more equity. And so I didn't feel that I couldn't do something because I was a woman or because I was a girl. And I grew up with kind of this tigress of a mother who, told me I could do whatever I wanted. And, a father that really propelled my career also and never told me any differently. So I didn't grow up with this vision in my head that I couldn't do something because I was a woman. It was, I think, more the societal aspect sometimes saying, you don't want to be a brain surgeon, they're not the type of group that you want to be with. And it was more of that, I think. So I think the world is becoming more international. It's becoming more global. We're having more experiences now more than ever with social media and technology where, we're reaching out to one another. One of the things that I think is so powerful is not only just what's happened with the book and the number of people that have connected with me that are all over the world, but with Women in Neurosurgery, I started the social media platforms a few years ago, and we had no social media presence. And we're such a small group. We said, how can we get out there? How can we connect with people? And we set up this Instagram account for Women in Neurosurgery, and it was unbelievable. Within 2 years, we had women neurosurgeons from all around the world, Brazil, Nepal, Indonesia, India, all connecting with us and saying, tell us about your practices, tell us about your work, And it was so incredible to me how the tentacles of that spread. And so I really think that, being kind of a child of the world and being, this child with this global view, the world never worried me. It never scared me. I never thought that the world was small, and so I think that's kind of carried over to my professional life, my personal life. I'm doing a business program. I really feel in medicine, we learn so much about medicine and our skills, but we know very little about business and finance. And when it comes to something as simple as negotiating a hospital contract versus looking at a business deal versus looking at your own investments. It's really important for women, especially, to have an understanding about, the dollars and cents of things. And so I started an executive management program at Oxford, and it's been wonderful. It's me using a different part of my brain. I saw a lack of knowledge in something that I wanted to learn more about, and that's what really drove me to do that.
That's amazing. So where are you in that program? Beginning, middle, end?
It's near completion. So there's final exams, and then that's essentially near completion. So it's great. At some point, maybe an MBA, but we'll see. We'll see if there's time for that.
Yeah. And did you get to go to London, or is it all online?
There is a final exam in London.
I just got back from London in May, and I just had such a wonderful time there.
It's a wonderful place. I think it's one of my favorite cities in the world.
Yeah, me too. I had the privilege of being in Paris in October and London in May, and I was like, I think I'm more of a London person.
Thank you for listening to The Revitalizing Doctor. We have an exclusive offer for our listeners. Get 20% off your Epocrates subscription. To redeem, go to the website epocrates.com and log in to your account. Click on the payment and subscription link to redeem the discount using code REVDOC20. That's all caps REVDOC20. This offer is good for new subscribers and cannot be applied to active Epocrates Plus subscriptions. Thank you for listening. Now back to the show.
So let's talk a little bit more about your book. So we have so many people that come onto this podcast, and I'm like, where's your book? And we really view this podcast as an opportunity to get information out there, to make what seems impossible possible. And I think it was 5 years ago. It was right when I came back from deployment, so maybe a little longer. I gave a talk, and a medical student raised their hand and said, "Where's your book?" And I laughed at him. I laughed out loud, and I said, "I would never write a book. What would I say?" He's like, "I don't know. I think you have a lot to say." And it took me about until a month ago to be like, well, maybe I could do this. So how did you do it? I mean, I don't even know how you find the hours in a day. Let's make the impossible possible. You've been a neurosurgeon, and now you're an author.
Yeah. So it started with just an idea in my head when I was a resident that I was having all these incredible experiences, and I wanted to share them with people. So I started writing notes down in a notebook and stories, patients that I connected with, different experiences that I had being pregnant, having my first child, all these things. And then over time started to voice memo to myself. So I actually, would have a thought in my head, and I would just go to my phone and voice memo, maybe a 1 or 2 minute discussion of that, or a passage that I kind of envisioned in the book. And then I hired a transcriptionist, actually. And so she essentially started taking all the voice memos and writing everything out onto a Word document. And then the next couple of years, we're taking those, phrases and moving things around and putting them into chapters. So it's kind of a lengthy, process. It didn't happen overnight. It took me a couple years to really get, I would say probably 2.5 to 3 years to really get something formulated. And then I found a literary agent I was connected with who loved it and signed me for, a representation, which was amazing because it's hard enough to find an agent. And then I worked with her for several years and hired an editor who helped me kind of put everything together more, formally, and then took it out in the world and showed it to publishers. So, but again, I think the process, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint by any stretch. It's very lengthy, but it's so worth it. When you're holding it and it's done and it's been, edited, proofread, fact checked, the cover design, the font, everything. It's really an incredible accomplishment. I feel very proud that I was able to put it out there. And I think it's really a legacy that you're creating. Yes, it's for you, but it's also for those who are gone. When you're gone, it's for those who are going to read it. And for me, it was for my kids because, someday I won't be on this earth and they'll have this book that I've written and they'll have my words on a piece of paper. And My grandfather was a writer. He was an author. My mother wrote books. So I have everyone's books on my mantle, and I always think they're really special because you may have like an email and you may have a document, but the written word is very different, I think, in book form. So it's just more powerful, I think, and it's long lasting.
I love that. I'm a voracious reader since I've been, very young, and I can't agree more. And I think there's so many wonderful stories about, there are a fair amount of books written by doctors, but I think there should be more. And all the challenges we're talking about right now with healthcare, I think getting these stories out to the public, because I believe if physicians and patients unite, we are going to be an unstoppable force to make the changes that need to happen in medicine. I think patients and doctors are largely aligned. I don't think there's much areas that we actually disagree on about how healthcare should be delivered.
Yeah, I very much agree with that. As doctors, we're also patients too, and we've had, I myself have had scenarios where, I've dealt with bedside manner. I've dealt with, and I'm sure you have too.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think, delivering quality care should really be, the bare minimum that we do. We should all be able to communicate. We should all be able to educate. And I do think there is something to be said for, all the studies that we're reading about women doctors and how women doctors' patients do better, and you look at that and you say, well, that's because maybe we care more. Maybe we communicate more. I don't know what all the reasons and all the factors are, but I think it is encouraging to know that there are more women going into the field. I think the hard part is keeping women in the field. It's the retention, I think, is the big issue.
Yeah, absolutely. So looking at what you've accomplished, being a neurosurgeon, writing a book, I think doctors in general are very good at delayed gratification, but I would say that's probably a superpower of yours. I don't know if you feel that way, but from an outsider's perspective, that you really seem to be able to be very measured. And I think there's actually a chapter in your book called It's Temporary. How have you been able to cultivate that? Like, how do you stay so grounded? And even just talking with you right now, you're very calm and grounded. How do you keep that marathon pace?
Yeah. I'm a firm believer in wellness, and I do a lot to keep myself well in so many different aspects, whether it's yoga, whether it's running. I'm a big believer in meditation. So I meditate at least twice a day, and I've done that for years. When I was in my teens, met a yogi in India who taught me visualization techniques. And I think he was really teaching me TM, transcendental meditation at a young age, but he really taught me about kind of visualization techniques and how you can look at your life and kind of figure out a strategy on how to get to a goal. Almost like an athlete where, you're imagining yourself running a race, or you're imagining yourself swimming in a championship, or you're imagining a baseball game, or, and I've kind of carried some of those techniques, throughout my life. And even times where I've had a really big surgical case where, I'm nervous about it. I'm nervous for the patient. I want everything to go well. I'll take 10 or 15 minutes before I even go in the operating room, and I'll sit in my office and just go through all the steps, and process it. And that way, when I show up and I have 10 people asking me what to do, or, and all the decisions that go along with that, I'm in a very measured, grounded state of mind. And so I think the mindset is the biggest thing, really, because I think if you're calm on the inside, you're going to be calm on the outside. So, that's what I've done. I've used a lot of meditation and yoga, and I'm a firm believer in that. I don't think you can do this type of job with this much stress and not have outlets. But I also enjoy a lot of time with my family. My family and my kids, that is my enjoyment, and spending time with them is my enjoyment. And so having all those things, I think, to keep you centered is really key. And it's really hard. There's, a lot of neurosurgeons I know that don't have those networks around them, and they struggle. And, I've definitely had colleagues that have struggled. I've seen multiple cases, multiple scenarios where there's been, difficulties And so I feel really lucky that I have these amazing people around me that, quite frankly, don't care if I'm a neurosurgeon, because if I could be anybody, but I'm their mother, I'm their wife. And those are the roles that are actually more important to them than my job, in my profession.
I just started meditating. I guess I'm coming up maybe on 2 years. How many minutes a session do you try to get in?
Usually 10 to 15 minutes. And I try to, do it first thing in the morning and once before bed or sometime during the day if there's time. So I'd like to just have those kind of quiet moments to process and, figure out a strategy, a plan. What are my next steps? Is there something I'm looking forward to, not looking forward to, try to kind of internalize all those things, come up with different strategies, pathways, ideas, just have quiet time, no music, no kind of outside stimulation, just these kind of quiet moments to really go through things and work it out internally.
I know you have to dash off to perform brain surgery. How many times do I get to talk with somebody and say that? But I want to ask you very quickly. Several times in the book, you reference being a tigress or thinking of yourself as a tiger. Can you explain that a little bit more? And I wonder if that's a tool that other women doctors could use and channel.
Yeah. So I guess you could say the tiger is like a spirit animal for me. And, it became really powerful. It was in 2016. My husband and I were in India, in northern India, and we went to a tiger reserve and we happened to see this incredible tiger on our safari. And we were told the entire time, you won't see any tigers, you won't see any tigers. So we'd never planned for it. And then all of a sudden, this just majestic, incredible animal showed up and was right next to us, within a foot of us. And we were completely unprotected. There was no cage, no guns, no sticks, nothing. It was a very raw experience. And so that was kind of a pivotal moment for me. I kind of thought about this animal and just this, being in the wild and having this kind of trust in some ways that the animal isn't going to leap and attack you because we really had no protection. And so that really became a powerful theme for me. And I thought about myself as this, animal, this tigress, if you will. And I actually wrote a second book, which will hopefully be coming out next year, called Sita. Sita is the title. And it's a middle grade fiction book about a tigress growing up in the jungle in northern India. And it's about deforestation, tiger poaching, exploitation of tigers. And I'm actually writing it. I wrote part of it with my children, so they're co-authors on the book, and it's going to be an illustrated book. So I'm really excited. The publisher's really excited. They've asked if they could publish it. So I'm hoping it comes out next year and I can share it back on the podcast.
Yes, we would absolutely love that. Well, since you have to go perform brain surgery, that's very important. Can you share how our audience can connect with you?
So my website is probably the easiest. It's very easy. It's www.drsheridewan.com. There is a link if you want to pre-order or actually order now. The book is out, so you could order the book from there. And then if you want to get in touch, there is a media tab. So please send me a message. I'd love to connect. I'm very approachable, I hope. So, I hope you'll reach out. I've had a lot of people, across the world reach out to me and tell me about how they felt when they read the book. And it's been really powerful and really brought a lot of joy to my life, to hear people enjoying my story. And it's kind of incredible and really impactful in a way that I really never anticipated. So thank you to everyone listening, for enjoying it and hopefully reading it. And I'm excited to, talk about it.
Absolutely. It has been an absolute joy and honor getting to spend some time with you. And now I'm kind of like, gosh, I want every neurosurgeon to be as amazing and awesome as Sheri. I mean, you're just so inspiring and so warm. And I'm so thankful that your patients have you. And I hope we inspire a whole lot more women through these conversations in your book to join the field of medicine. And yes, it is really hard. And I thank you for sharing those stories, but we're changing it. I think the women coming behind us, and I think this group, us being in the middle of this with our experience, I think, again, if these two groups unite, the new physicians and the ones that have been at this a little while longer, we can change the culture and make it even better profession than it is now.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think, we need to be champions for the younger generation coming up, and then that was part of why I wanted to put the book out there too, is really to show them it's possible. So take the impossible and make it possible.
Wow. And just like that, we got the title of this episode. I love that. Thank you. I look forward to having you back on the pod again soon.
Thank you so much. It's been great chatting with you today.
Thanks for listening to The Revitalizing Doctor, a project of Revitalize Women Physician Circle. Our mission is to connect women physicians and allies through innovative, value-based coaching methods that align trust, support, accountability, and skill development to ignite the courage and clarity necessary to take bold actions, create change, and thrive. If you're interested in working with us, check out our website at peoplealwayshcc.com/revitalize or email us at revitalizemmm.info@gmail.com. This podcast represents the views of our host and guest. It does not reflect the views of any institution we work for or with.
Hi, it's Dr. Risa E. Lewis, dropping in to tell you about a book that Dr. Adara Landry and I wrote. It's called Microskills, Small Actions, Big Impact. It's a business self-help book coming in 2024 by HarperCollins. Pre-order now. Microskills, Small Actions, Big Impact, wherever you buy your books.